All right, so yesterday we started putting a lot of content into our person class. We made 4 properties, and then we started making methods. So let's look from the bottom up here. We made a birthday method, which increases the age by 1. We made a fancy talk method that does a system.out if the person is alive. So we added a little conditional switch in here. If it's alive, it outputs one thing. If it's not alive, it outputs another thing. We also wrote the die method, which sets alive to be false. And then we were going to write the born method, but that's where I introduced the concept of a constructor method. The constructor method is called when you build an object of this class. So if we go back to the example, that's what we did right here. When we said person equals new person, that's when it constructs a new person. Now, we called it person, so maybe that's a little confusing. So let's start today with a different person. So underneath that line, let's say person, and let's give a person like a more realistic name.
Chad.
You want to go with Chad? Let's make it a girl. I don't want, and Chad does not sound, Chadette. Pick a girl from your favorite movie. Let's go with a movie theme.
Bella, I think was her name. Twilight, right?
Bella equals a new person. Okay? And then we can say Bella dot talk. Okay, which is the exact same code we had with this other person that we had talk. But now again, we're making 2 objects. It's one class, 2 different objects, person and Bella. And if we play that, both should talk, but they'll both say the same thing. Bless you. I am Jane Doe, I'm 0 years old. If you're wondering if I'm a male, the answer is false. They both say the same thing. So what might be useful is making a change between these 2 people, okay? So, for example, with Bella, why don't we slip a line of code in between and say Bella dot name equals, and what's Bella's last name? Those of you who watched the movie. Which movie is this from? Why don't we call her Bella Twilight? Twilight. Okay. Okay, fine. Bella Cullen. Okay. And Bella dot. Let's give her a birthday. So we're going to say your name is Bella Cullen, and we're going to give you a birthday. And then we'll have them talk. So let's play. Now, notice the difference on the second output. I am Bella Cullen, and I am 1 year old. And if you're wondering if I'm a male, the answer is false. So now we've made a change to one of our objects. And that's, again, the difference between a class and an object of that class. And it's right here in the constructor of the person class where it sets that initial data, where it sets age and stuff like that. And then we changed it with other lines of code. Okay? Now, what I want to do today is I want to write a second constructor, what's called an overloaded constructor. Remember, overloading is something we learned about in methods, is when we have 2 methods, same name, different parameters. So let's write it again. Right underneath, public person. And we know it's a constructor because it has no return type, not even the word void, and the name of the method is the same as the name of the class, including its capital letter. But we're going to give it a parameter, string new name. All right. Here's how the code's going to go now. In a lot of ways, it's the exact same 4 lines of code. So to save time, I'm going to copy and paste those same 4 lines, except for the last line. I'm not going to set the name to be Jane Doe. Instead, I'm going to set the name to be my new name. Okay? So what the thing I pass as a parameter right here in new name, whatever I pass into this parameter will then get sent along to here and then put into this thing, which happens to be the property that I have stored up at the top. So at the top of this code of the person class is that name. So now, let's go back to our example. Oops. And what we can do is these two lines right here can be compacted into one line by just taking the words Bella Cullen and moving it in as an argument that's being passed to this method. So now you can see in one line, not two, I can construct the person with their name. So I send the name along through the parameter in the constructor. And if I play it, it should play the same way. There it is. It works exactly the same. So now I'm building a person with a preset name. Whereas the first one was just a default person, Jane Doe. Dawson.
If you wanted them to have like multiple birthdays, would you just put that into
We're going to get that. Yeah, you are reading my mind. Okay, so here's in the slide notes. Constructor uses a parameter. If your constructor has no parameters, it's actually called the default constructor. So that's just the name for it. It's like by default, it calls that constructor. As a little side note, if you do not write a default constructor, a class can be instantiated without a default constructor. But if you write a constructor with parameters and no default, then you cannot have a default. I wouldn't worry too much about that. That's just a little side fact on that. But what if we want to do more than just the name? What if we want other things to happen in addition to the name itself? Okay? What if we do this? Let's write another constructor. So now we're going to have three constructors. Public, person, and we're going to send it string new name, comma, int new age, comma, boolean, new is alive. We don't need all four of them because, or not is alive, is male. Then I would once again copy these four lines. This one would stay the same, is alive equals true. But these other two would pick up their values from the parameters like this. Whoops. Okay. But at this point, I'd say to you, wow, we have to keep thinking of brand new ways. And even I was confused right there, writing these different names for stuff, right? Like age equals new age, Ismail equals new Ismail, name equals new name. What if I had a fourth one and I had to come up with other names like newer name? Like that seems like a waste of time. So I'm going to show you a better way to do this. This would work, by the way. There's nothing wrong with this code. So actually, let's test it before we go any further. Let's go over here and let's make another person. Say another person from this movie that you guys like. So Edward. Jacob. Spelled like that. Equals a new person. And now we have, if you actually press Control Spacebar, you'll notice it shows you all three constructors available. The one with just the name, the one with the name, age, and the gender, and then the default constructor with nothing in it. So what is Jacob's last name? Jacob Twilight. Should we just use Twilight for this one? Jacob Twilight. Next parameter would be the age. About how old is Jacob in this movie? Isn't he a vampire? Isn't he like hundreds of years? Oh, he's a werewolf. Okay. So is he like 25? The actor probably is, right? Okay. And the gender is male. We're going to set to true, right? This is a male. Okay. So let's go with something like that. Jacob, the new person, Jacob Twilight, 25 years old, is a male. Did you find out, Peter, how old Jacob is from this movie I have no knowledge of? The video, resuming. So apparently he's 26. Okay. And then let's have Jacob talk. Same thing. So I'm going to run that, and you'll notice that this third constructor also works. I am Jacob Twilight. I am 26 years old. And if you're wondering if I'm a male, the answer is true. Okay. So now we have a male in the picture here. But I want to go back to the person class for a sec. Okay? And I have this in the slide notes as well, so I want to show you what I'm talking about here. In the slide notes, it, again, seems unnecessary. that I have to constantly be creating new versions of the same sort of thing. So just not just calling it name and new name. So there is a way around this. Okay, there's a way to do this that goes around this. Now, your thoughts might be, well, why not just use the same name? Name equals name, age equals age. But the computer will get confused by that. That's like in math class, you saying x equals x. It's confusing. It doesn't really make sense. So there is a way around this, so I'm going to show you. And here it is in the slide notes. You use a special keyword, this. This is a keyword that refers to the class itself. So let's change this up to in front of the age right here. Well, first of all, let's rename these parameters. So this thing's going to be just called age. Okay? This one's just going to be called name. Here's a nice little trick in NetBeans. If you press Control R, you can rename it. And notice it renames it in both spots. This one, Control R. And I'm just going to name it Ismail. Notice it renames both of them by pressing Control R. So now I've done that. But here's where the code is confused by this. As it looks over this code and it says name equals name, et cetera, et cetera. This is pretty confusing. It does not know how to sort of interpret this code at this point. So this is where that keyword comes into play. In front of this version of age, I put this dot age. And I put this dot in front of all of these. Whoops. This dot. This dot. Okay? Now the code is no longer confused. Now it makes sense to what you're trying to do here. Now, I want to take a second to explain this in more detail, but I'm just going to collapse some methods. I know I'm going a little bit quick here, but let me shrink this down a little bit. Okay. So here's what I mean. Into this method, we're going to be passing three values into name, age, and Ismail. They're coming from that other class, the example class up here. So they're coming from there. And what we're passing into Ismail is true. What we're passing into age is 26. And what we're passing into name is the word Jacob, etc. But I'm just going to go with Jacob for now. Those are the three things getting passed into these three parameters. But now, it takes this thing, for example, age, and it goes down to here with it. And Ismail, right here. And name, down to here. And then it says, oh, okay, name is going to go into this, Ismail is going to go into this, and age is going to go into this. But how does it know the difference? By adding this in front of it, it knows that it's talking about the one up here. All of these are part of this class. So by putting the keyword this in front of it, it makes it explicit as to what the code is talking about when it does this. Anyways, run it once just to make sure it works. Yes, Dawson.
So instead of like overloading the methods like you said,
Yeah.
could you
Just have one of them?
well, yeah, just have one and then just have all of them. But what if you didn't want to change, like say my person isn't a male, so I want to keep that as a false. Would I just put it as false?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. Because right now we can still write code to change it. So if we wanted to change Jacob's gender, I could just go Jacob dot Ismail or equals false. Like I can do that right within my code right here. Oops. And then if I have Jacob talk again, like a second time, now the gender has been changed in between those two times. So in the second time Jacob talks, notice Ismail is false. So I can do that. And that perfectly leads into my next point of what I was going to teach you. You're like my perfect setup man today, Dawson. Okay, so here's what I mean. Okay, actually, before I say what I mean, again, everything I've said to you guys is in the slide notes. So here you can see again the exact same notes in here where I have two versions of this constructor being called, a default person and then a person called walks, and then the talking method is adjusted, okay? And then an example right in the notes of the same sort of stuff happening, okay? And as we just did, if I wanted to, I could go in like I'm doing here, which I wish I could do in real life, and change my age to 30. That would be nice. I'm not sure if I want to change my is male to false. Maybe, you know, it might be. Who knows? And I'm not here to judge. And my name to, for example, Waccinator. Maybe I want to change my name. Maybe I want to change the spelling of my name. So sometimes we don't want that to happen. Often we don't want people to be able to change all that stuff. And that perfectly leads into my next point. The next concept in classes I want you to know about is the concept of encapsulation. Encapsulation is a property that basically means sometimes we want to lock things away. And the analogy I'm going to use is a building right here. So this is a blueprint for a building. And right now, these doors are public access doors. So anyone can go in them. But these little rooms inside the buildings might be private rooms where you can't get in unless you have a special membership. And those words, public and private, accurately represent those. Like right here, even in this school. The school is a public place, so the public can walk into the school like they did at lunch hour today. But then there might be rooms in our office that are private rooms that you can't go into because they're special private rooms. So those words are very commonly used for us. So those are the words that are going to apply to our code. Public areas and private areas. Okay? So that's the analogy I find works the best to describe what we're about to do. Okay? So I've made a little animation for this. Here are two guys, Mr. Public and Mr. Private. Mr. Private wears a yellow shirt because he works in this building. So he can go into the private rooms. So get ready for this incredible animation here. This is why I'm re-recording this video, because the other kids didn't see this cool video. Here we go. Those with private access can travel all through the building. They can go into the private areas, they can go into the public areas. Let me back that up and show you that incredible animation again. But they can't leave the building. Just like as a teacher, I can't just walk out of this classroom right now. I work here. So the private workers can go all through the building. And the building's divided up into two areas. The properties areas and the methods areas. That's just the name of their departments. This is department properties, this is department methods. So that guy who works here, he can go through the private methods area, the public methods area, the public properties methods, and the private properties area, but he can't leave the building. In other words, he can't leave the class. Now, Mr. Public, he can go into the public areas, like the methods and the properties, but he can't go into the private areas. He's not allowed. But he can also leave the building. Okay? This analogy, I hope, will stick with you as we start to learn how that applies to classes. Okay? Public things are locked from the private. Private things are locked within the class, but have full ability to go throughout the class. So here's how we're going to change this in our code. Go to the person class and go up to our properties. And let's think about what should be public and what should be private. Our gender is not something we can just change. It is a private thing. So I'm going to, in front of the word Boolean, in front of is male, put the keyword private. Huh? You get the analogy? Like your privates? Never mind. So this thing is now private. And notice what that did to my code over here. If I now try to, let me just try this, try to go, hey, Jacob, dot is male equals false. Going to turn, oh, now I have an error. All of a sudden now I have this error in my code, and if I look at why I have an error, it says, whoops, the reason is, why is this an error? Because is male is private. You can't do this outside the class.
Unless you call it constructor method.
Yeah, we'll get to that, but I just wanted to show you that for sure. You can do it through the constructor because within the constructor, good point, is male is within the class. So it's in here already, so it can go all around in there just like the private worker can within the class. Is alive. Let's make that private. We can't determine whether we're alive or dead. That's determined for us. When we're born and when we die, that sets that ability there. What about age? Can we change our age? I wish. So we're going to make that one private. But name, you know what, we can. I did that. I changed my name when I was in middle school. Not legally, but I used to be called by a different name in elementary school. And so my sister wanted to use her middle name when she was in high school. So let's make this one public, which it, by the way, already was. It already was public, but this now makes it explicit. So these keywords, public and private, modify the properties. And they also modify the methods, which is now why you see those words on the methods. That's what they're doing. They're making them public or private. Okay? So this concept is the concept of encapsulation. And actually, let me pull back here for a second. I don't think either of you saw that picture I just put up there. If I say the word encapsulation, or just the word capsule, what concept comes to mind? A capsule. Time capsule, yeah. Drugs, yeah. Yeah, actually, when you take cold medication, it's in a capsule, right? Think about astronauts. They're in a space capsule, right, when they go to space. And that's the pictures I had up here a second ago. I don't have a time capsule picture, no. But there's a pill, a capsule, and there's a, well, this is actually a kid's bed. I found this on the internet, but that's pretty cool. Wouldn't you like to have that, kid's bed? The idea of encapsulating means you put it inside of something. Just like a cold medication has a bunch of little pills inside of a bigger pill, and a time capsule has information inside the capsule. So when you design a class, sometimes you want to lock things inside the class or encapsulate it. This is also known as data hiding. You are hiding data from outside the class. Okay? So that now when we have more than one class, the two classes can communicate to one another, but we may not want them to be able to see things. We're kind of hiding things within our class. Okay? And this is the way you set it up when you build what's called your code interface. As a programmer, you design classes where you think what should be public, what should be private, and how do I sort of incorporate that. Okay, we're going to stop there today. That's a big concept to end with, the end of the week with. So, oh wait, once again, I'm told that I have to say, and I was given adjectives today by you kids. What were they again? I can't even. No, it can't be that one. That word was already used. Well, what was the adverb I was supposed to use? Slam that big, juicy subscribe button. There.